Andy Park, listen, you've been at Marvel Studios since Captain America, the First Avenger, 11 and a half years ago. And here we are, Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings. Does designing the MCU's first Asian American superhero to have a feature film and kind of the corner of the MCU that he inhabits, does that have a particular significance to you?
Of course. I mean, for your listeners or viewers or watching this or hearing this, whether they can see me or not, I'm Asian. I'm Asian American. My parents immigrated from Korea. I was born and raised in the States, so pretty much in California all my life. So, I grew up in the 80s, 90s, in America, watching Saturday morning cartoons, all the sitcoms, all the movies, and, I was aware that I was a little different, growing up in predominantly, non-Asian type of community. So, yeah, I think my whole journey of growing up here in the States and finding my identity, it was a challenge, right? You don't want to be different. You want to just kind of blend in. And then eventually, as I got older, I kind of found my roots and embraced going from a place of like feeling a little bit ashamed, of my background to like embracing it and being really proud. Right. And then of course, growing up, not seeing people like myself, a lot of Asians on screen, or if you did, it was, not something that you're totally proud of, or sometimes you're a little embarrassed because it's more stereotypical. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And I've been here for so long, as you mentioned, and, been here for a lot of the firsts, right? First, first this character, that character, Captain Marvel, Ant-Man, Black Panther, and then of course with Shang-Chi, we've had there's been a few Asian characters throughout the history of the MCU, but to have the first title, leading Asian character, and just the world that we've created, as you mentioned, in this corner of the MCU, I'm definitely proud, happy, and I have kids, and so they're growing up at a time when it's all normal. It's all just part of the world that we live in. So yes, absolutely. I'm totally proud.
I mean, look, just the same way as you, man. My mom is Thai. She was born in Thailand. Same thing. And I didn't have a lot to look up to in terms of superheroes, especially. But now Shang-Chi was here, and honestly, it brought a tear to my eye. First of all, it's one of the best MCU origin movies. It's one of the best MCU movies out there, and I think it did such a great job of representing Asian cultures in such a beautiful way, especially amongst superheroes, right? But in this film, Shang-Chi, we get a new costume and a new design that we haven't seen before. How many different iterations of Shang-Chi's costume did you guys have to go through? And does it always start with the comic version and kind of build out from that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think generally speaking, yes, we do we go back to the source material. We're always going to be respectful to the past and all the amazing creations from creators like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, all the hundreds of artists that have contributed to the Marvel comics. Of course, we got to start there, right? So we do a deep dive into exploring all the different takes, looks. These characters, they always have different looks drawn by different artists. So I'm looking at all that stuff. Like in the past, he's wearing a traditional kung fu outfit. A lot of times he's depicted essentially as like Bruce Lee. So he's shirtless with the kung fu pants. So I did it all, and then of course more recent iterations, I think he had more of the jumpsuit, which is definitely obviously inspired by Game of Death. I think Bruce Lee. Right. So I took all of that, and I was exploring all different types of options, and that's kind of a starting point, right? And because we're working so early on, there wasn't a story yet. There wasn't a concrete story, so I didn't know exactly like, why is he wearing this? And of course, as a designer, you need to know the whys and the hows, and that'll help determine where I go in my design exploration. But early on, they just want to kind of see high level blue sky ideas. So, I did it all. I did from the shirtless, kung fu pants to, and I also did a deep dive into just the, Chinese culture, right? So I looked at a lot of the fashion and that kind of material, right? So it's things like the hanfu, you know. So in my research, I found out that hanfu, where it goes left to right, the collar, the way, the significance of it, and how it also influenced like other Asian cultures like Japanese, Korean in their fashion as well. For me, I grew up Korean, so I grew up wearing the hanbok, which is inspired by the hanfu. So I did all that kind of exploration, and then as we developed more and more the story, Destin Daniel Cretton, Dave Callahan, as well as the producers, we started honing in on what this suit is, what this costume is. And then once the idea of Tao Lo, the mom, the dragon, that's when it started getting refined, and like the ideas of like, oh, maybe he could be wearing, like this outfit is some form of armor, some form of protection. So that's when, I had the idea of the dragon's skin or dragon scales and that kind of thing. So that's how the ideas evolved. So I did tons of just different exploration, and it took several months to finally get down to a place where Destin and the producers were like, okay, this is the look that Shang-Chi will have at near the end of the movie.
That's something, I mean, look, you're responsible for bringing to life a lot of the characters that are beloved by fans from decades ago to now, or even just new cinematic fans that are entering the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the first time. Can you talk to me about the collaboration process that you work with the story department and the director? Because do you kind of like land on designs first, and then as you're getting story beats, kind of work the elements into the costumes, or how does the workflow of that work?
It's very organic, right? So like, I myself, and as well as the visual development team, we started doing work even before Destin, got the job, or even before Simu Liu was cast. So we're working on it a lot of times, even like pre-production. It's not even officially in production yet, but that's one of the benefits that Marvel has, and the foresight that they had early on in the early years of the MCU, right, of Marvel Studios as a company, where they said, like, let's form a visual development team of artists, knowing that there's going to be all these movies coming up. So they always have us there. It's a unique thing in Hollywood that doesn't really exist, because pretty much 99% of the movies you see out there are there's designers and artists that work on those, but they're freelancers. They're just contractors that work just during pre-production. And then after pre-production is done, they leave for another job, and then it continues, and then they start filming, then it goes to the post. But those artists that did those initial designs aren't there at Marvel Studios. We're there from the beginning, even before pre-production, then during pre-production. Even as they're filming, a lot of times they'll come to us and say, hey, we have either new ideas, or we want to evolve certain ideas that they thought they liked. And then a lot of times we're even there during post. So as they're going through post, they find new things, or sometimes they even want to change a character or change a look of a character, where they're doing designs as well. So it's a very unique setup, but I kind of lost what your question was. I don't know if I answered it. The writing, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, it's very organic. So we're working on it. And then, obviously, then eventually the writing actually starts happening. Dave Callahan, and then Destin Daniel Cretton. And then in conversations, they'll tell me certain things that they're thinking about, but there's a lot of things where they haven't honed in on what is going to actually happen. So for example, they didn't exactly know, what are we going to do? We know there's going to be 10 rings,
right?
But is it going to be these 10 rings like in the comic? And then early on, Destin had the idea of like doing the what do you call those? The training rings. I forgot the exact names. So the Hanfu, I forgot what it's called. The training rings.
Yeah.
So that's when we start implementing that, very much like Kung Fu Hustle, right?
Oh,
so, yeah. But then they didn't exactly know, like, what do these rings do? Like, do they have different powers, akin to like the comic book? So we did explorations of that as well, where maybe each ring has a different elemental property, or can do different things. But I think at the end of the day, it got too close to like the Infinity Stones. So that's when the idea was, they're just more like 10 rings that are used for fighting, and for is similar to blasting, but not exactly blasting. But they can do different things. They can have defensive qualities, offensive qualities, all that kind of stuff. But that came along with us as well. As we're developing ideas, they're like, oh, that's cool. And then that's how they implement certain things. Like you saw in the final fight between Wenwu and Shang-Chi, like there's a, it's really quick because all the fighting is really quick. There's a moment where Shang-Chi actually steps on the rings, like stairs, and then he does a drop down kick onto Wenwu. Like that's an idea that came from us, from our department, right? Wow. Where we're trying to figure out like what can they do, so that he can even use them to kind of hang, do different things, swing. So it's not just for throwing, you know, they can do different things. And that came from our department, our visual development department, Alexi Bricklot, you know, Jackson Z, Anthony Francisco, just, you know, a lot of amazing artists that just came up with different ideas. And as we did that, they started like, oh, that's cool. And then a lot of times they'll come back to us and say, hey, we have this other idea that's going to happen with the dragon, and then we'll iterate on that. So it's a very organic, collaborative process.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Now, never in my life, at least in the duration of the MCU, did I think we would get comic accurate costumes. But WandaVision and Loki, we got exactly that. We got Wanda, Vision, and Loki in their classic costumes. Were there any concepts at all that involved either Razor Fist, Shang-Chi himself, or Wenwu in their classic comic costumes?
Well, I agree. I love comic accurate costumes because I grew up in the 80s, 90s as a Marvel Comics fan. Right. So for me, working here has been me always kind of pushing the more comic accurate look. But because we're trying to find the vision of a director and the producers, my job is to give them a whole range, right? Right. So I'll give them, here's a more comic book accurate, and then we start going towards, you know, whether it's more grounded or whatever the story dictates. We'll do full versions of, and a range of versions. Sure. And even ideas that maybe they didn't think about, just to throw in more ideas. And from there, that's how, you know, we're helping the process to, you know, to find what is this exact look. So certain looks that we've done in the costumes or characters that we've done, you know, like as you mentioned, have been very accurate. Like WandaVision, like I did a more comic accurate look in our very first appearance in Age of Ultron, knowing that the story did not dictate like that she would be wearing any kind of like costume, and I knew that Joss wasn't interested in that. Right. But I had to do it as the fan inside of me, right? But and then it's the story dictates, it's just more of a real world kind of look with, you know, nods to the comic, you know, especially like the color. And then of course in WandaVision, they're like, you know, when they came to me, said, we want to do the you know, more classic Scarlet Witch look. I was like, yes, with the crown and everything. So to answer your question about Shang-Chi, Razor Fist, well, Razor Fist, I think we knew from the get-go that they were going to want to go more tactical. Sure. Because just because of the story, right? It wouldn't make sense. And then I think some of the classic comic looks, it kind of looks like he's got this mankini look or something. The mankini. Or like or a wrestler look. So it doesn't make sense. So that one we didn't go there. And then also with Wenwu and Shang-Chi, because of the past, like we knew we had a little bit more leeway in not having to be so beholden to the past. So we had more freedom, right? So again, with Shang-Chi, I mentioned, like, you know, I did versions where he had like a very much like a kung fu outfit. I did the shirtless versions, you know, or him in a tank top. And then I did, the more with that upside down triangle black motif with the red or reddish orange kind of look. So I went there. And then for Wenwu, like, you know, whether it's the Mandarin looks or everything, you know, I think they also, from the get-go, they knew they wanted to go, you know, a more tactical route. And then, but trying to merge in the tactical with some of the historic, you know, Chinese kind of warrior looks, right? So yeah, that was kind of the exploration. But I think you'll also see, you know, there were some concepts that were done. I did one where like Wenwu and Shang-Chi, this is like one of the first paintings I ever did, again, like when there was no story, of them on top of a dragon over an urban, you know, city, and their costumes were, or especially Wenwu's, was a little bit more comic accurate.
Really? That's awesome.
So yeah, you can check that out eventually.
That's amazing. Now, speaking of freedom, I know in Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, we dive deeper in the fantastical and mythical side of the MCU. And I know you come from the God of War video game franchise. Can you talk to me a little bit about your approach to that side of the MCU and the creative freedom you had with that?
Yeah, that was fun because, you know, once they told us that, you know, we knew there was going to be a dragon. So early on, we're like, oh my gosh, like, but then once they said there's going to be a whole mystical dimension that they're going to be, you know, entering, and Tao Lo and all these mythical creatures inspired by Chinese lore, right? So we did a deep dive into the Hundun and the nine-tailed fox and the, you know, the phoenix and just so many different animals, and the what is it called, the food dogs.
Yeah.
So yeah, the artists that, you know, I had a pleasure of working with, you know, they, you know, it's so fun. That's part of my job as the director of visual development, where I can like just say, hey, you know, you guys work on this, you know, kind of, you know, dole out the assignments. And you know, I got to mention John Staub and Tully Summers and Jared Morantz, and again Jackson Z, Anthony Francisco, and Alexi Bricklot. Oh shoot, that's the bad thing about starting the names, because if I forgot anyone, there's gonna be hurt feelings. But yeah, and John Staub, you know, and Tully Summers, them two in particular did a lot of the designs. Like John Staub did the Hundun with Morris, right, and the nine-tailed fox, and the food dogs. Yeah. And then you know, Tully did some other characters and creatures as well, like the phoenix and that the horse. I forgot what animal that was based off of. That when they, you know, remember that horse looking thing?
Oh yeah. Whatever.
I forgot what the mythical creature that's based off of. I should know.
Is it a griffin?
No, but your readers and viewers will know. But
no.
It's I'm blanking right now. But yeah, they all did amazing stuff, and just to see it come alive like on screen, and that was pretty amazing. And yeah, especially my background, God of War, like doing the mythical creatures, and we don't get a lot of chances to do that, you know. In the MCU, is you know, we do a lot of aliens, human based looking aliens, but not a lot of like creatures. So when we do, it's just nothing but fun. Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, the last question I have for you is, I know that you're working on Thor: Love and Thunder, and look, I'm really excited for that film. I can't wait to see Natalie Portman reprise her role as Jane Foster. We got Christian Bale coming in as Gore the God Butcher. What can fans expect from the visual element so far from that film, without giving too much away?
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited too, because, you know, got to work with Taika on Thor Ragnarok. And just that whole experience of working on that film was like, you know, he shook it up, you know, he shook up the whole franchise, right? Oh, yeah. To the point, as a creator, you know, even I was like kind of scared, like, whoa, like, are we going too far, right? That kind of thing. Wild. Yeah, but that's the whole history of Marvel Studios. Like they don't just rest on their laurels and just do the expected. They're always there. Like if you haven't checked it out, that new book, the story of Marvel Studios.
Oh yeah,
you got to check it out. It's a really good read, and it just tells you the whole history of Marvel, Kevin Feige, and all the leadership, and just there's a reason why there's been over a decade of, you know, successful movies, and just why this franchise is growing. Right. So Thor: Love and Thunder falls right into that, right? Or it's just pushing the boundaries of, like, you know, what's comfortable and what should be expected, and you'll be surprised, and pushing these characters. So, and the visuals go along with that. So I think he said it in some interview where he's just like, he's surprised that he shouldn't be allowed to make a movie like this, like and I get it. Like, this movie is crazy wild, it's so much fun, and I simply cannot wait for everyone to see it, because it was so much fun to work on and design so many characters and do keyframes for. So it's going to be a good one. It's going to be.
That's incredible. I can't wait, Andy. By the way, one last question: is there any character, I know even if you're not working on whatever said project, is there any MCU character that in your free time you just work on concepts hoping to get that shot of a character that we haven't seen yet debut?
I don't have time. I have, you know, things in my mind like, oh, I can't wait to work on this and that in the future, but Yeah, my job, I'm juggling so many things at the same time, and we're doing so many movies and Disney Plus shows, so
right?
there simply is no time to, what is this free time you talk about?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, look, Andy, amazing job. I loved Shang-Chi. I can't wait to watch it again. I've seen it 4 times now. It's fantastic. It's such a brilliant film, and you do such brilliant work, and all of you guys in Marvel Studios are incredible. But thank you so much for your time, man. I truly appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Joseph. Take care.
Thanks.